I've always had the belief that probably 99% of the people that are on government sustenance or dependence would prefer to be self-sufficient. And the studies that we've done and the focus groups we've done prove that out. And we're going to talk today about some programs that are doing that already, and then also one of our chief policymakers that can wave his magic wand and just get everything done that we ask for. So, but with me today, we have the Honorable Drew Springer, State Senator from Munster, Texas. How many of you know where Munster is? Hey, if you need any summer sausage, that's the place to go. There's no question about that. And Drew and I actually came in the Texas House together in 2013. We were desk mates.
That's right. For a little while, and I helped him understand all the legislation that was filed being from Munster. Of course, I was from Arkansas originally, so we were pretty sad shape. But Dr. Bonin sat in front of us, so Greg Bonin was really smart. We could always lean on him and get the answers. But Drew attended the University of North Texas, where he was a letterman in tennis. He's also a very good rifle shot, so be careful if you really make him mad. We experienced that a few weeks ago. He spent 15 years working for a Texas railcar company where he started as an accountant and rose to be head of 3 different divisions. He left to join his father's financial services company that specializes in agricultural securities, futures, and other types of investments. Senator Springer is a lifelong conservative Christian, fights to preserve traditional Texas values, promote economic development, and undo burdensome regulations. And I will tell you, watching Drew over the last decade, every one of those things are exactly true. Literally, probably the hardest working person in the Texas legislature. He doesn't see a fight that if he's interested in it, it's not willing to step in the middle of without any consideration of what necessarily might be best for him politically, personally, or anything like that. And there's very few people in our legislature that think that way. He is dedicated to trying to help Texas, and he does a good job. And Drew, we're glad to have you here. Thank you, Ron.
We also have with us today Cindy Casey. Cindy is the Director of Client Strategy Services at Catholic Charities Fort Worth. And if you're not familiar with Catholic Charities in general, I will tell you, they do yeoman's work all across the country, not just in Texas. But Fort Worth is one of their lead chapters that have really, really been on the edge of innovative programs, especially as what Cindy's going to talk about today, related to helping people move to self-sufficiency. She oversees long-term case management programs, including Padua. Dadgummit, I knew I was going to mess that up.
If you're in Italy, that's probably the right way to say it.
Well, that's me, you know, with my cultured background, that would do it. Born in Louisiana, raised in Arkansas, got to Texas fast as I could spell it, which was about age 25, but that's another story. But is a randomized controlled trial conducted in partnership with the Wilson Sheehan Lab for Economic Opportunities at the University of Notre Dame. Called LEO is what we normally would call it, right? But Notre Lab for Economic Opportunities. So they're really trying to fund these different pilot programs, and actually Texas TPPF has put money up to help in that scenario to see what works and what doesn't work. And Cindy's going to talk about that in just a minute. She's led the team through the development of strategies that support client engagement and success by specializing in a problem-solving framework and use of resources and financial assistance. In addition to case management, Cindy oversees the agency's resource stability program, client outreach, and the agency's career development team. And if Daris Lee is able to join us, Daris is from an organization, and we'll talk about it even if he's not here some more, called Bonton Farms in Dallas. Has anybody heard of Bonton Farms? It really is an interesting program. The gentleman that started it was just a business guy that ended up having a passion for South Dallas, and the work they've done down there is just incredible, and the people that they've helped, many of them coming out of incarceration, trying to get back into society, and the roadblocks are there, which Drew and his colleagues have done a lot of work to try to help knock down some of those roadblocks, but hopefully Daris is able to get here and talk a little bit more about that in his journey. But Cindy, I want to get started with you. If you would just kind of tell us a little bit about your background and the program and what have you, because I think it's important that people understand that, not everybody just waits on government to solve all their problems.
That's a good point. I came to Catholic Charities about 13 years ago, and as we began talking about how we wanted to move forward and change things with our clients, we kept having clients that were coming in the door, and 1 month they might need help with their rent, and then 2 months later they were going to come in and maybe they needed tires on their car. And the clients themselves were telling us they were tired of this, that they really wanted change. But the way that social work has traditionally reacted to these situations wasn't going to help that situation. So as we began to look at what Padua would look like, our CEO at the time, Heather Reynolds, who is now the executive director of LEO, got together with not just civic leaders, but she gathered clients, she gathered staff, she gathered other grants and foundations and government leaders, and came together and said, what can we get out of the way to really put something together that's going to address the challenges that people face when they're trying to move themselves beyond poverty? And Padua is the result of that. At that time, I was working in another department, and I came to Heather and I said, there's only one other thing in this agency I want to do, and that's it. And I've been with Padua then since 2014 as a result. And I've seen a lot of change come from it. What makes Padua different, I think, is that normally if somebody comes up and they need their rent paid, we have traditionally, transactionally paid their rent. And this all comes from a thought process that if you go ahead and you alleviate someone's financial need in the moment, that they are going to be able to think beyond that and plan for the next month. That doesn't happen. People aren't able to do that. We aren't wired to do that, those of us who can pay our rent. If you put me on a diet tomorrow, and I can go all day if I'm busy with work and I don't think about food. It doesn't even occur to me to think about food, but you put me on a diet, and the first thing I'm thinking about is, when can I eat again? How much can I eat? How many calories is that? What's a good cookbook to get things out of? I'm consumed by it. The same thing is happening to people when they can't pay their rent. So we developed Padua to be able to address those needs. And we've learned a lot in the process. We took our first clients in the door in 2015. We did this immediately, as you said, as a partnership with LEO. And we did this, you don't normally do a randomized control trial, which is what we did with LEO. At the same time, you open up a brand new pilot program.
Yeah, let's talk about this. You're interrupting, but
Go ahead.
Just explain what randomized control trial means, because not everybody in here might understand that, including myself.
Okay, so it is what we consider the gold standard of evaluation. It is the strictest evaluation, examination of whether something's working or not. So what happens in a randomized control trial is that you do a lottery system, and people take a chance of getting in a control group where they don't get services at all, or into a treatment group, which in our case became Padua Case Management. So in the past, since 2015, we have in both control and treatment group, have over 700 clients that have been enrolled. About 350 of those have been in the treatment group. In addition to that, we've got about another 100 to 150 clients that we've served in Padua during COVID. Because during COVID, we didn't think that somebody could come in and we could say, I'm so sorry, you're in the control group, you don't get any help. You know, when you had a pandemic raging in 2020. So we've served quite a few people this way.
Yeah, you certainly have. And now Padua, can we just back up? That's a name that most people don't use every day.
No, it isn't. It's a city in Italy, and we are Catholic Charities. So there is, I don't know if there's many Catholics in the room, but has anybody ever heard of St. Anthony? Okay, well, normally in Catholic circles, there's the lore to this, that you pray to St. Anthony if you've lost, your keys, a notebook, whatever. Help me find this. What St. Anthony actually did in Padua, back many, many, many years ago, was he served the poor. And he did so in such a way that recognized the dignity of the human being. He immersed himself in their culture. And so what we did when we named this Padua, we did this in honor of his approach to working with those in need and in vulnerable situations.
Wow. How many, and you may not know the answer to this, we didn't talk about it ahead of time, but how many people, Catholic Charities are worldwide, right? I mean, they are something all over the world, I'm sure.
And there's different stations. Yeah, here it's called Catholic Charities, and then
they
you've
may
got
call it
Caritas,
something else and something else. But for us, is it run by each diocese, or is there in the U.S. is it kind of a national head and then it kind of filters down like that?
It depends city by city. We do have We do have Catholic Charities USA, but we don't all report up under Catholic Charities USA. It's more like having a resource, right? They help us in a lot of our issues, especially with like disaster services,
Right.
things like that.
Yeah.
So what happens is in each major city, you can have Catholic Charities either be part of the diocesan structure, or you can be your own 501c3, which in our case, that's what we are.
That's what y'all decided.
Right.
But Catholic Charities Fort Worth doesn't just do what you're doing. They do other things as well. Is that correct?
Right. We have a number of services. We have services working with refugees, with immigration. We have services out on college campuses where we're helping students maintain their education. For non-academic reasons, people pull out of school at the community college level, and we're there to help people stay in school because we find that that is one of the better predictors of people having success in life and moving beyond poverty. Can't get Padua out of my mind. What else do we have? We have so many different things. We have career development programs. We have a transportation program that helps people get to doctor's appointments and help seniors get to medical needs if somebody's going in for dialysis, those type of things.
Yeah. So I'll come back to you in a minute, but Drew, obviously Catholic Charities, and it's been something that's been a part of the Catholic Church for a long, long time. They believe in, as Jesus, certainly instructed us to make sure that we help the poor. They instructed them even in the Old Testament days to leave the edges of the field unharvested so that the poor and the sojourners could come and harvest those themselves. And so, but we've spent an awful lot of money as taxpayers providing the safety net. Why is Catholic Charities even necessary?
Unfortunately, I think sometimes as a society we've moved too far away from what really the role of the church is of doing that, and we've tried to take that over too much from the governmental standpoint. I mean, you're exactly right. Cross Catholics is another organization. I'm a Catholic, and so, they work in Haiti and the Dominican Republic and all across the world. They'll do micro loans and things because we really come back to, you can give a man a fish and he eats for a day. You can teach him to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. And so it's helping people, raise them up, give them the skill sets, help them when they falter, and continue to build them up until they're self-sufficient, and then help give them, ask them, can they then help others to do the same thing? And so, exactly right. I fully believe in that system. But from the government standpoint, sometimes it's just easy. Oh, we see this problem, we see this, let's just throw money at it and hope it works. And, part of the problems with government programs too many times is they can trap people in that. We see this huge cliff in so many of our governmental programs, which is if you're at this income level or in this need, you get 100% of services. But God help you, if you make $500 more, you're going to get nothing, and you lose $10,000 worth of benefits. Well, why would I work an extra 4 hours to get that if I'm going to lose so much? And when I'm looking at the way we do our programs, I'm constantly trying to look at that. Also realize from a governmental standpoint, we have a finite amount of resources. Yep. And so, I've done bills in the past that has asked for TANF to be audited.
And let's talk, TANF, just explain what that is.
Yeah, and so
temporary assistance for needy families.
Needy families. Yeah. It has $120 million worth of overhead. Well, we ought to audit the overhead to make sure that they're doing things properly. In places they do it, 10 to 20% of savings.
And that's all administered through Texas.
HHSA.
Through the agriculture, right? Is it administered under ag? Is TANF under ag or is it under HHSA?
I thought it was under HHSA.
You're probably right. No, I'm sorry.
But, and then we had one that passed a bill that says, we need to audit who's on the rolls. Because again, I want to make sure it's going to those who are truly needy.
Yeah, what's the first word in TANF? What's the T stand for? Temporary.
Yeah.
Temporary means not permanent.
Yeah. But, so we also want to audit our TANF and our SNAP programs in this for eligibility. And we want to look over cross rolls. And we passed that last session because we want to know, have people moved to Michigan that Michigan should be taking care of because they're probably getting benefits there, but we continue to send them. If you win the lottery, you're not supposed to be getting these, and we find that lottery winners continue to get on these programs. And so, again, you come back to it, and somebody goes, well, you're trying to cut. I said, I am not trying to cut the budget. we're going to put the 200 million, 500 million, whatever we're going to put in that program, I want to know that there's enough dollars to go, because there's always usually more of a need than there is resources.
Yeah, and it's mostly federal dollars for that.
And a lot of those are partnered up that we're responsible for administering the program as well on those.
Yeah. Yes, well, those are all policy issues that probably fly under the radar that most of us don't think about every day. But something as simple as a government policy that requires an audit, an outside, or really our state auditor audits that, what it does, it shines the light, and it allows then for legislators to say, okay, next session, now that we know where the lights shine and where the issues are, to go in there and implement policy changes. Because if you just try to make a policy change up front based on your instincts, the people on the other side will generally knock that down. So you really have to have the data to go in there and do that.
It's one of my favorite books. Ron and I, we spent a lot of time in the car, and so, a whole bunch of audio books. There's one called Nudge, and getting people's behavioral economics on where you go with this. But, one of the bills I filed this year talks about unemployment insurance, indexing it. And you index it to what kind of environment are you in for a workforce. The states who have done indexing, people find jobs twice as fast as those states that are like Texas that are fixed 26 weeks. And so 75% of people will find a job within the first 2 weeks of being laid off in the current environment. The other 25 are usually the last 2 weeks. And if you index it and you shorten it, they're just sitting there saying, I've got a government benefit, I'm just going to check out. And right now we have such a shortage of workers in the state of Texas, we need them to come back into the workforce. From that standpoint. No question. Look, times are bad, we're 10, 15% unemployment. Hope I don't see it in the rest of my lifetime, but that's when you need to be able to, that's when you need to have more of that government assistance.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. Cindy, let's talk about, give these people does all of the funding for your program come through the church or private donations and what have you, or do y'all receive any government funding at all?
The only area in the agency that receives any federal government funding, can't speak today, is our refugee program. We don't, with Padua, we don't receive anything. And so that is all from private donors, private foundations, like-minded groups that want to participate with us.
Yeah, and the philosophy behind that is I would assume that, because you certainly could use more funding, but the philosophy is we don't want strings attached to it. Is that kind of the scenario?
One of I think the biggest challenges that nonprofits face is that when you receive money, and sometimes you still receive this even with foundations, this is going to be good for this zip code area, or if you live on this side of the street, or if you're this ethnic group, or if you are, at this level of education. What we wanted to look at is if we really helped people learn how to plan and how to cope, help them develop emotional resiliency, and as well as working towards, resource planning and financial assistance and the financial coaching, financial literacy, put that holistic approach in there and made it available to anybody that was in need, what would happen?
Yeah. Well, walk us through, if you don't mind, setting an example pretend that somebody in this room's come in to your office, and obviously there's a need. The most common needs, which you would know. Walk us through how your program works and what's the expectations are of the person asking for assistance, and what assistance y'all provide, and how long it lasts, and what does it look like on the other side.
Okay, I'm gonna give you a real example of a single mom that came through, and her journey, what this looked like. So she came into the program, and she came in while we were still doing the enrollment in the RCT. That actually ended this past summer. We're still part of the randomized controlled trial, but we're not enrolling into a control group anymore. So she got into services, and she had been in a really horribly domestic violent situation. She had 2 daughters, and her 2 daughters had seen way too much violence, so they were then acting out in school. The one youngest daughter had actually been kicked out of schools. The mom had become, because of the emotional distress, a hoarder. She was having trouble holding a job. She was having trouble functioning. So she came into services. And people always ask me, who's the best fit for Padua? And it's the person who's going to come in and saying, I can't live like this anymore. Something has to change, and it's going to start with me. That's the person, somebody that's willing and able to work and that has that attitude, they're going to do really well in Padua. And she was that person. So she came in, and for about 2 years, we worked with her. We did counseling for the hoarding, diagnosed a few other issues that needed to be taken care of, health and mental, emotional health issues, helped keep her daughters in school and address some of the trauma that they had been through, and went ahead and started working a plan with her, because as she came in, she had a voucher from the domestic violence, right? She came in from a partner that had gotten her a housing voucher.
A housing voucher, okay.
And so we were moving through a program to get her off that housing voucher and to become employed. This worked well. I would tell you that I'm trying to remember, I should have looked this up. She moved from making, when she came into the program, I want to say she was making $10 or $11 an hour. She had had a great job, making about $30,000 a year. COVID hit, she lost that job. Came back into the program, and she got a call center job, making $10 or $11 an hour. Came back with us, and if you looked at the list of resource connections that she made as part of this plan moving forward, she's now making about $20 an hour. So, you know, she's made a significant improvement. She's graduating from services, leaving services. She is housed, paying her rent on her own, SNAP benefits, which are food stamps, those are gone. It all came down not from just that list of different resources, and y'all, this list, because I did this for another presentation I gave, there have to be 20 or 25 different agencies and organizations on this list. One of the things that we do in Padua that's different is we don't just hand somebody a phone number and say, call these people, they're going to help you. These people are going to give you money. What we do is we come back and we say, okay, we're all equals at the table, right? You came in here breathing. You are creative, resourceful, and whole. I'm sure a whole lot of you have heard that slogan before. So when people come in the door, we are recognizing their ability to plan with us. And we sit down and we use these resources, putting together and knitting together a plan that is going to help them get to where they want to go. We're not coming back and saying, this is where you need to go. You're making a mistake. Don't do it this way. It's where do you want to go? Let's put a plan together. They're the resources we know. This is what we can do. What can you do? What can you bring to the table? And where can you go with this? And that approach moved her forward. In 2.5 to 3 years, she was out of services.
So you'll actually, do you provide some assistance in, looking at the different services that are available and helping her figure that out and utilize those?
Yeah, we do what I say, not just resource connection, we do the resource planning. In addition, we do provide financial assistance ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, that's a little bit different too. We don't just pay somebody's rent. What we come back and say is, okay, this is going to be part of a plan. So we look at financial assistance as a tool. It's a tool to learn how to develop coping skills and planning skills. So if you're coming back in and you're telling us, and we've done this before, y'all, somebody comes in the door and they say, my rent is $1,600 and I need 1 month's rent. Yeah. So then we sit down and we say, well, how are you paying this next month? You're not employed. Well, I don't know, I'll find something. We can get you some job interviews. Well, they're not going to do a job interview. Well, okay, then the rent isn't a good idea for you right now. A better suggestion for you would be to see if we can get you into a shelter, because we're not going to give you rent money to throw it away now because we have limited resources.
Yeah, that's
so
a good point.
What happens if somebody comes in and they're willing to go ahead and say, help me get a job and I've got this, mm-hmm. We will help pay their deposit for moving into an apartment, their rent. We will maybe pay, they might be only asking for 1 month's rent. We'll give them 3 months' rent so that they can go ahead and start putting savings aside while they're working.
Yeah.
And that's really, when I sort of started off, that's the solution. That's why the church is so important, or organizations, even if they're non-religious, because government doesn't have that skill set. We don't have the ability to sit here and say, we're going to have this holistic counseling approach and figuring out how to do this. We say, here's the problem. Let's put money in this bucket and hope that the solution happens, and that we fix it. We're starting to see more and more of those partnerships. We did one last time in a public-private partnership, much like this. It was the religious charities along with special needs in San Antonio, mm-hmm. working with providers. It's called the MAC. and it starts to become a poster child for this. We need to look at that same type of situation for educating and moving these people out of poverty, because they have to come to the realization they need. And one of the things you said is counseling. And that's one of the challenges we face as a state is counseling and mental health, needs. We're at least on the public sector, at least 5,000 mental health professionals short in the state of Texas. 15% of the people that are in jail right now can't stand competency, and we have beds available for them now. We've spent millions and millions of dollars to have beds. Now we have beds and we don't have workers.
And Speaker Phelan talked about that.
Yeah, and so I was in the news, hit this morning, I filed a bill yesterday to start a mental health enterprise fund to one time pull $150 million. Let's attract 5,000 mental health professionals from around the country to come to Texas. We do it with companies, why don't we do this? And it will save us more money, and sometimes that's what people don't realize is we can invest now, and our counties, you as taxpayers won't have to pay as much in county taxes to incarcerate people who right now are spending 500 days on average in jail. And their sentence may not even be that long. And so we need to get those people well. We need to get them back in the workforce. We obviously have that demand. One of the things that we're working on, and you talk about this individual, the next thing that we need to integrate with this is so many jobs change every 2 to 4 years. And so you need a new certification, a new micro certification. We have to figure out as Texas how we're constantly upskilling and reskilling Texans. And right now that's really our community colleges and TSTC. And I can tell you that's a big focus right now in the Senate is how do we do that? Because you take that person with a high school degree, they're going to make somewhere between $8 and $15 an hour more than likely and be in that, which is a tough way to exist. But you get them in a skill set where they can go, look, if you've got a clean driving record and can pass a drug test, truck drivers right now are making over $100,000. And TSTC, we're talking about investing a huge amount because there's just not enough truck drivers. And when you sit there and say, I was an accountant, you were a financial planner, we talk about some of the degrees we use, I can tell you my daughter is a biomedical science major, makes about half of what a truck driver makes.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that helps raise people out of poverty. How do we get them in that? How do we find those fits and say, that's a $4,000 investment we're going to make in you to get you through this.
A couple of things to unpack here. One of the things that you mentioned, Cindy, was that there are about 25 different governmental agencies that provide some type of potential service or financial help. And the state of Utah did something that was really interesting, and they created a single window kind of that people went to, and that particular person that was their case manager helped them navigate the entire process, similar to what you guys are doing individually. And so TPPF is part of an organization with 3 other states, Georgia and Louisiana, called the Alliance for Opportunity. And one of the things that we're working on, and I've been involved in this now for a few years, and I see Rod Bordelin back there. Rod, would you come in for just a minute? Come on up here for a minute. I want to talk a little bit about this. He is nervous right now, I can tell you that. But one of the things that we're looking at in there is, can we get legislation passed, maybe not this time, but maybe next time, to have that single source where someone can go to, because a lot of what happens is they just confusion and they just give up, right, over even what to get and how things work and all that type of stuff. So and we're also working on what Drew talked about, which is really interesting, these welfare cliffs. And a welfare cliff, and actually one of our analysts, really smart people, have developed this spreadsheet that you can put in, for example, for Texas, you can put in some criteria like it's a single mom with 2 kids and yada, yada, yada. What benefits would they qualify for, okay? And how much would their father of those 2 kids, because they're not married, have to make in order for that family to come out ahead. and it's just remarkable. There's so many things that we incentivize that's anti-family. In this situation, I think we did a mom with 2 kids that the dad, if they were married, he would need to have an income of like $65,000 to overcome, what she could be eligible for. And that's just the wrong incentive, right? I mean, we want the families together. We all know that mom and dads are both in the home, that situation, assuming there's not violence in the home, that can be a better situation. Not taking anything away from single parents. My mom was a single parent for quite a while. But we just provide the wrong incentives from a government level. And Rod, the reason I asked you to come up here, because I think what Drew was talking about is important, and what Cindy leads into this. One of the things that Rod helps us do is we're constantly trying to figure out what are the barriers for people that are coming out of poverty, as well as just any Texan, but coming out of poverty, maybe coming out of, they've served their time in incarceration, now they're trying to turn their life around. Just the simple barriers of being able to enter a profession, right? We would call that licensing, because a lot of things have to be licensed to be able to do. And Rod and his group spent a lot of time on it. So talk a little bit about that, if you would, Rod, on the barriers that people face. If I'm coming out, I want to be a hairdresser, I want to be a plumber, I want to whatever. Talk a little bit about that and kind of what some of our work is on that.
Sure. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No.
And thanks for the no heads up, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I know you. I didn't want you any preparation.
Yeah. No.
Greg asked me to do this.
Ron's
if you're
right.
ready.
We've been working on this with a number of states where we're really trying to look at ways in which we can provide, as Ron says, greater incentives and greater facilitation of getting people back to work. There's all kinds of things that are either barriers because their lifestyle is a problem, as Cindy was saying, or because in some cases the government programs that are there to try to help them are so dislocated that it's hard to get them aligned. So we're working on looking at reductions of occupational licenses, as Ron said, actually looking at specific types of licenses that really have very little necessity. You think of a license like any kind of regulation, and there should be a necessary purpose that it's there to protect the health and safety of the public. But a lot of these licenses have just kind of been lingering for years and years, in many cases decades, and some of those have adverse impacts, particularly on the lower socioeconomic ladder folks. And we're really trying to see if we can't kind of reduce those. And frankly, the legislature's done a great job the last couple of sessions reducing the numbers of some of those licenses. We've worked with the Department of Licensing and Regulation to reduce the required training hours that it takes to get some of these licenses, reduce the fees. So reducing some of those burdens so that people can get those licenses, get back to work. In addition, as Ron mentioned, looking at the ways in which sometimes the criminal justice system puts barriers in place, and see if we can't make it easier for folks that are coming out of incarceration, have done their time. Regulated entities still need to take a look at those on a case-by-case basis, but we're trying to take down the, in some cases, there are statutory bars. So if you have a felony or some kind of criminal record, you may be restricted or prohibited for the rest of your life from engaging in certain occupations and professions. And we'd really like to see if we couldn't just do these on a case-by-case basis and let the agencies take a look at these individuals and see, in many cases, these folks are the very people you actually want to engage in these occupations. But again, it's case-by-case. And then finally, when you look at some of the government programs, the safety net programs that is being discussed up here, things like TANA, things like SNAP, other safety net programs that are existing. We have large agencies such as the Department of Health and Human Services here in Texas and at the federal level. There are a lot of times there's federal dollars and then state dollars, and there are case managers in those organizations, much of which similar to what Catholic Charities does, but on a much larger scale with a lot of dollars. Not necessarily in the most efficient way. That's why it's, efficiency audits are certainly important. We'd like to see continuation of some of those, an expansion of some of those, but also a consolidation between some of these agencies that service these same people in the guise of trying to get them back to work. So the same person that goes to the Department of Health and Human Services for some of their safety net programs should be immediately serviced by the same type of case manager that can evaluate them as a human being, much as what Cindy was mentioning with Padua, and say, look, we've got some job training services at the Department of Workforce Commission. You might need some vocational rehabilitation. There may be a number of services that exist out there, and right now it's up to the applicant to jump around and see if they can't access all of the services, get meetings with various case managers, go through that whole process. If there was one door that they could walk into and get one case manager that could service all those needs and evaluate them, I think ultimately the state could save administrative costs. But ultimately, the best thing is we could actually do a better job, I think, assisting that individual and applicant to get back on their feet, help them in the meantime on a temporary basis with the safety net programs that they need, but ultimately get them back to work.
Yeah, good. That's good, Rob. And you know, one of the things that Drew mentioned is the community colleges in TSTC, which is a Texas State Technical College. And the Speaker Phelan talked about it this morning. His deal is moving from providing funding for enrollment to funding for completion and job attainment, right? So that everybody's incentives are aligned perfectly on that. And that's something we will see some movement on in the House. And Rod and his team and Aaron Valdez are really putting some support behind what the legislature is trying to do in that. And that brings me to an idea, which I have many of, often not very good, but I have many of them. Drew's heard most of them. Is, that's one thing that we could think about in a deal like Catholic Charities or Bonton Farms, is that don't fund them with restrictions up front like you might have to, but once they've proven that they've put this lady, as an example, onto the road to dependency and they've saved the government X amount of money, then reimburse them for some of those costs at the time, because you already know the result, right? And that might not have, now I'm not saying Catholic Charities would take that or not, but there are some organizations that would be very helpful for.
No, I mean, that's the way, for those who don't know, Texas State Technical College, you go to college, they graduate, they get a job. Texas State doesn't get paid until 5 years later for them having a job for that period of time. And so sort of that backloading and that incentive and saying, okay, we're going to measure you, and then with Catholic Charities or whoever we might be able to work with, it's that same type of then revolving fund that you get it, and you get more money coming back in for showing those success. Yeah. Because look, and we're starting to do a few things different. Texas Workforce Commission has the Rising Star program for childcare, and they rate people whether they're a 2, 3, or 4 based on their needs and where they're coming. So rather than saying you get childcare or you don't, it's you get different levels of it. And so we're starting to see some movement. But you just go back in history and you look, I think it was $26 trillion we've spent on the war on poverty from 1974 to 1920 or to 2020, with the same percentage of people in poverty. And so we've got to break this system and utilize things like this, think differently of how we come up, how we, instead of just giving handouts, that we really truly are raising people up, giving them the skill sets they need to be successful.
And listen to this, Padua is doing is the perfect example of that, actually. Mm-hmm. Tell me, have y'all done an analysis yet on, on average, how much it costs to kind of bring someone through, y'all's program?
I don't have updated numbers on it. I can tell you that when we first began Padua in 2015 through 2016, it was costly. Yeah. At that point, every person that came into services had a case manager and a case worker. And so that was 2 staff members for every client. It's an expensive way to do business. Mm-hmm. The financial assistance, because we weren't taking any government funds, that was expensive. We've made some changes through the years. We've changed our staff so that we now have a case worker, supports 2 case managers, so we've reduced that staff in half. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, and I didn't want to interrupt while you were talking because I was getting so excited by what you're talking about. There's so much of what you're saying that is right on target for what needs to be done. One of the areas that is so difficult for us, as well as for government agencies, it's staffing. So what we have right now with Padua, why this works, every case manager has no more than 25 clients. Now those are client families. One family may have 10 family members and we treat all of them, but they may only have one.
Yeah.
We can do this with that level. If you go into government agencies, the caseload jumps up to 70. So when we talk to our clients who are coming in the door saying, most of our clients, you all don't have TANF. They're on SNAP, they've got vouchers when they come in, but not TANF. Because if you do TANF, you have to get in case management, and they can't get a case manager who has the time to talk to them, but maybe once every couple months.
Yeah.
That's not enough to do what you guys are talking
No.
about.
And so that was something that you said earlier about really doing audits to see where the waste is, okay? Because you can't handle 70 families, which might end up being 200 or 300 people, right?
No, I mean, look, I talked to, I won't name the agency yet, but, but you know, I have a former employee that works for them, and you know, they go down, they meet with different people's need, and they take the report. Then they call to Austin, read the report to them, and they type it into the system. Well, I mean, if we ran a business like that, you'd be out of business. I mean, clearly you would come up with a program that let you work on an iPad while you talk to that person to document everything, and it would upload, and we would eliminate half the employee needs from that, which really we don't need to eliminate half the employees. We need to half the caseload to where you actually can be engaged and really help make that change. You know,
And I think another thing, Drew, we've talked about this before too, and it kind of, all of this kind of links together is what you find in the sausage making of public policy, is that, you know, we house the large number of the people that service these people in need. Many of them are housed right here in Austin. One of the most expensive places to live in the state. And the state is never going to be the highest payer. And so therefore, especially in an economy like we have now, in an economy in Austin, people can find other jobs making quite a bit more money. Well, a $50,000 a year job in Austin, it has a different value than a $50,000 a year job in Gainesville, Texas, in Drew's district. And the quality of work probably goes up as well because of the type of person you're able to recruit to do that job. And so decentralizing we live in a day and time where technology is king, right? Being able to decentralize these massive agencies to other places around Texas would not only make our government more efficient, but would also help the economies of some of these communities that might struggle more than, say, Austin does.
no, that's exactly right.
We've talked about that for a while.
No, yeah, we have, and we just need to be able to figure that. We just closed a TxDOT office, and in our infinite wisdom, we moved those 2,000 people that have nothing to do with the Capitol about 5 miles away, and built a new mega $1 million facility. And if we were to move those same, if he'd have moved 500 to Laredo and 500 to Longview and 500 to Louisville and Lubbock, you know, we talk about it, you know, the problem with $50,000 here in Austin is you're struggling to figure out whether you're going to make ends meet.
That's right.
You have $50,000 in Laredo, and all of a sudden you're upper middle class. You're not struggling to worry about, you know, can I make rent? Can I go buy a house? Can I do these things? And you're much more focused on what your work is. And we've just got to do that. It may be one of the silver linings in the pandemic. It showed that not everybody has to be in Austin. Not everybody has to be in the office. I think we're going to go to much of a hybrid situation to where you're in some, out some, and different things. But you know, managers are learning to manage different.
All of those really weigh into, they weigh into what can we ultimately have available to provide the services. Because, you know, it's true, the needs are many and the workers are few. And that's the way it is. So Cindy, tell us, how long would somebody generally be in y'all's program? I know that's different based on their needs, but have y'all determined kind of what your average is or anything like that?
An average for it's about 2 years.
So
about
I mean,
2
just
years.
think about that, 2 years of intensive help and work and what have you.
Meeting with twice a month.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell you it always happens, especially after somebody gets a job. They might have one in-person meeting and then they have a phone call.
Yeah.
But that is one thing that I would tell you that the pandemic has done for us. We have become just so good at doing these virtual visits, and
Yeah.
it's enabled us to serve our clients so much more. fully.
So when you talked about randomized trial, some people with services, some people with not, it's kind of how you do it. Have you drawn any analysis of, what, can we make a broader statement on what y'all have learned?
Well, first we've learned that it's working, right? We have clients that are earning more money and they're working more in full-time positions than we have in our control group. So it's working. Secondly, what we've learned is we've come back and said, okay, then let's look at this and what is the secret sauce? Why is this working? There's a lot of people out there doing financial coaching and they're not having the same kind of results that we're having. So when we look at this, it's that emotional resiliency that I mentioned to you before.
Yeah.
It's helping people learn how to cope and to plan. That is what this is all about, and that's why you need to be able to have the right amount of people being able to provide those services.
Great. We're getting ready to go into question and answer session, so be thinking of your questions. But Rod, tell me, what are some pieces of legislation that you're particularly following or would like to see? The filing deadline, Drew, is coming up. It's different in the Senate because they don't have any rules,
We
but
don't- we'll
in the House,
we'll suspend the rules
they
in the
suspend
Senate.
all rules, okay? Which is awesome if you can do it. But the 10th for the House, right? Because we were always sticklers for rules. But Rod, what do you follow and what do you see?
Sure. So there's several. We've got some on occupational licensing that, as I mentioned, we're looking at putting in some tools to help further reduce some, as well as actually putting on the chopping block a handful of some specialty licenses that actually were looked at by Sunset last time, but kind of left there and consolidated. It has to do in the cosmetology world, but it's things like if somebody just is doing nothing more than blow drying or shampooing somebody's hair, they still have to have the same license as the one who's cutting the hair. Things like that. Those are the kinds of people that are just now needing to get back into the workforce. It's not a particularly high-paying job. I think we can do without requiring those licenses and training and education and things of that nature. But in addition, we've got a couple of bills that we're looking at. One would be what we would call empowerment accounts, and it was essentially some of what I was talking about earlier about consolidating some of these functions and looking at ways in which, at least on a trial basis, we can consolidate some of the services that currently exist, SNAP and TANF. Now, there's a little tricky part to this. Some of these, as I mentioned earlier, are federally funded. The feds get a little dicey right now, especially under this current administration, with allowing states to tinker much with that. But we're going to use as much as possible some of the state funds that are currently earmarked for some of these things to see if we could do a pilot project and handle these a little more holistically for the applicants and put them all in one bucket. It would be an optional program for those individuals, but it would give them, it was more like a savings account.
In exchange for taking this, they would not participate in the other.
Exactly.
And to try to compare almost in a randomized trial as to how those work.
And
So,
let me
go ahead. Yeah.
let me add to what Rod said, because one of the things that we face as a state is we're talking about eliminating licensing and doing that. We have several preemption bills this session, and I've got one as well, because we're seeing cities adding licensing on top of state's license. And we're not going to stand for that. We're going to say the state's going to do it. It's once and for all, and we're going to say that we do it at that
The great thing
spot.
about that I did not know this when I joined the legislature, and it was interesting for me to learn. The United States federal government's powers are derived from the state, right? The various states. In theory, we're talking theory here, John. Okay, in our in our utopian society. In Texas, it's totally different. Every city, school district, county, any type of government entity is a political subdivision of the state. And so they don't have any powers within themselves other than what is granted to them by the legislature. And that allows people like Senator Springer and others to really have an impact on not just what goes on in his district, but what can go on uniformly across the state, like these preemptions. So that's really smart. So let's go to, good job panel, but let's go to question and answer time. We've got a gentleman coming around here, and I'll just pick as you see, and then we've got about 10 minutes or so, 20 minutes. for
Okay,
this. Yeah.
quickly, I've been through the entire cycle that you guys are talking about. I was on my way to dropping out of high school. My reading level was well below normal. And I went in and talked to a career counselor for the first time. He gave me a few rules. One, find where you fit. And he said, I know where you fit. All you talk about all this electronics, we're going to send you to the VOTEC school. Half a day you put up with high school, the other half. So that's an education part that goes into poverty. More so now, I think, than ever before. If you look at the language skills index of people coming out of high school, it's frightening, very frightening. Yeah. If you can't speak, you can't work. Or you will find some kind of illegal work where everybody doesn't have to speak, because it's all covert. The second thing he said is get someone else to pay your tuition, and you'll always be able to go to the best schools. The only way to do that was to not go to the state, not go to the federal government, but go to someone who had a business that is going to make more money off me than they spend on me.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the next thing was to get, I ended up with a double E. I also ended up being a certified multi-gas welder. I ended up as certified as a machinist. And all these were part of a little company that I worked for. And the wages were poor. I was poor. But I knew that the bullet I shot way back in the back
Yeah.
would make me a lot of money. Well, it did.
Yeah.
It did.
Over the long run.
It also powered me to go to a PhD.
Yeah.
Now, I see people in poverty. The worst are the ones forgotten outside the cities. They suffer their poverty in silence. I have not heard much of anything that the state has done recently to find and help the poor rural populations.
Go ahead.
I just want, we are
really-
moving out into the rural areas. With the education program that we talked about before, we're out in Vernon, we're out in all the cities around Munster, we're out there a lot. We've also taken one of the case management programs that are in my department. We've gone out to Eastland County, which those of you from around Ranger, Eastland, I mean, that area, Cisco, it's been devastated. So we're out there working now.
Yes.
We are going out.
But you are
to
not the
Denton.
government.
I'm sorry?
You are not the government.
No. But
No,
But
we're not.
I acknowledge
Yeah.
you're doing wonderful things, yes.
Well, no, I'm just saying the need's huge. It's huge.
And I do think that's a good point, Drew, as to how we can target some of this funding to, which we do in a lot of cases, rural areas on other stuff, yeah.
No, and yes, we don't have the big service centers and some of the other type of deals, but there are those that will connect people. And I think you usually find in rural Texas, though, that if you find the right people to find the help, you actually probably get more. Although we do have some problems. I had to deal. One of the challenges is if you're in a county below 3,000, you have no work requirements. Right. So you can stay on assistance for life.
Is that right?
There's no, it ends in 18 months. It ends in this period of time.
And there is no support to get you off
So
that
when you
rock.
get it, if you're in Memphis, Texas, unemployment rate's 15%. But if you go over to Childress or to Amarillo, it's 2%. Where are the services that says we will help find you an apartment in one of these other cities to give you a job and get you going? That is where really the disconnect, because the state sits there and says we can't force people to move, and we can't cut it off. And the only way you cut it off is the bill I tried to pass.
Limit the benefits.
Limit the benefits.
And that I would put forward is the big city, big government
Right.
idea. Get them all out of the stupid little towns.
Yeah.
Just get them out.
Yeah.
Because the water is unavailable and too expensive. The infrastructure problems have piled up over the years in small towns. So we have a third world in small towns. And that is undeniable. I can give you 7 cities now that are on the brink of failure because all incentives are gauged towards big cities. And I resent it.
Yeah.
I've got plenty of my money, but I live next to a city and I'm very involved with their politics. And they're doing without, and they will.
Yeah.
They will because they can't afford or train their people because of lack of information. I would propose a lot of, or a group of mobile ombudsmen that are, if you know that term,
Right.
that are stationed all over the state to just go and work the people who really need it and just need information.
Yeah.
Just the information.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Lady right here in the back. Here. That's you. Yes, ma'am. Next to the back, not all the way back.
Hey, hello, my name is Janine Washington. I'm representing the LLC in Houston chapter. As a case manager myself and working with workforce, I actually am a poster child of the similar programs that you're talking about. The only thing is that I educated myself in learning how to connect myself with those programs. I'm originally from Virginia. They had a program called VIEW, which is Virginia Initiative Employment Work Program. When I learned about VIEW, I was at rock bottom. I was on TANF benefits and with 2 children. Single mother and on housing and all of that as well. But I didn't learn about this program until I was at rock bottom. I could have prevented myself from going into the devastating poverty system had I known. So again, it is a lack of information. But with this VIEW program, what was unique about it is that I was assigned a case manager. I was also assigned a career counselor. My career counselor was at my house every morning, 8 a.m. And all we did was go back and forth to get job interviews, fill out job applications until I got a job. He didn't even stop there. I had to do a career assessment, which was called Career Scope. It is awesome. I found myself through that assessment. So long story short, I'm just curious on how we can, I brought this up to WC and all of that as well, because the organizations that I was involved in, the nonprofits,
Right.
it wasn't getting further than the office manager.
Yeah.
I had contact with the CEOs and things like that, but it was like a command, chain of command, yeah, thank you. The chain of command was just blocking me from being able to talk to someone and say, look, I know how this could work. We could do a pilot program. But so my whole thing is, I'm glad I'm here because I'm talking to the people that need to hear it. But it's like, I'm really interested in connecting communities.
Well, please connect with Rod, because he runs that program for TPPF, and we'll look into that VIEW, because that's exactly the thing that we're trying to figure out. You know, the Utah model similar to that, and what you're talking. And we want to make sure that we take the best of everything else and try to do it here. So please make sure that y'all stay connected. Okay, right here on the front.
I'm curious what this panel thinks of universal basic income or universal guaranteed income. Would you favor abolishing existing welfare programs with a proposal like that, or is that something we should avoid?
Well, we have the pilot program that Rod talked about maybe before you got here, was an empowerment account that would be similar to that as a pilot to see if people would be willing to get off a program in exchange for probably a temporary income amount that would kind of be put on a card or something like that, with strings attached from the standpoint of moving through the system in a positive manner. And so I think it's a pretty radical idea for conservatives to propose that. And I was against it to start with pretty hard. But I do believe that these types of radical things need to be tried in a pilot scenario to see what happens. In general, when you say basic income, I'm totally against that. But if you're talking about a temporary program that allows them with the proper financial assistant training to move to self-sufficiency, I think those are things we have to try. Right?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, the the problem, as we understand with universal basic income, is it's not really income. We want to get back to empowering work and empowering people to want to work. And it's not just the income that they get from that, but it's the self-satisfaction and empowerment that they get from that. And that's why we use the term empowerment accounts with this other program that we're looking at.
Great. Yes. Right there in the red on the left.
Good morning. My name is Raquel Olivier, and I am so proud to be a Texan and a Catholic affiliated with Catholic Charities. Have you all considered using small businesses to be part of this particular program? Because as a business owner in the state of Texas, I am always looking for employees who are not only professionals, because we do provide a professional services aspect of our business, but we also have a staffing component where we provide more layman opportunities, starter programs and starter opportunities where we can literally bring them in at a livable wage. Right now, we are actually looking for operators in the Dallas metropolitan area for microtransit services, and we're also looking for reservation agents and dispatchers for our call center. And so for those particular opportunities, we would love to be able to partner with the state of Texas and or Catholic Charities or any other
So
organization.
Cindy, how do you all do that? How do you look for employers? How do you do that? That's a good question.
It's a great question, and we would love to partner with you. We have several partners that we work with. It's primarily where the hot industries for us right now are medical. We do a lot with CDL companies, but we have a lot of families that have, if it's a single parent situation and they have kids, they can't go as far as what some of the companies want them to. But we do have partnerships. Sometimes the partnerships will pay for the training that people have gone through after if they stay employed. It varies, but we're always looking to extend that.
And one of the things that the state, we did pass a bill, Drew and them did last session, or maybe 2 sessions ago, that was called Earn While You Learn. And the state has a program set up to reimburse companies that are willing to bring on people and train them in a particular job, okay, and pay them a living wage that's required in there. And if they do that, they can be reimbursed for a portion of that training. So that's a program that's out there, because that's exactly what we want to do. We want to encourage people, because some people can't go through training because they can't eat, while they're going through training. So you want to be able to incentivize. A couple more questions, then we're going to have to wrap it up. Okay, the lady in green, I think that's great. Well, that's a man in green. That's just as good. You'll be next.
Hi, my name is Matthew Garda. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Texas at El Paso. And so I want to ask if you can walk us through sort of the program services that Padua would provide a full-time college student working 2 jobs. And on that note, we hear a lot that people don't want to work, right? But with our college graduates, we find that we're putting our students through dozens of interview rounds just for that entry-level position, only to not be earning as much as they possibly could. So if you can sort of walk us through the program services that Padua would provide full-time college student and how we can alleviate some of those issues that college graduates find in finding that entry-level position.
Sure.
Great.
So first of all, what we do with Catholic Charities, it's not Padua that's working at those college campuses. It's another program called Stay the Course or Education Navigation, depending on where you are. And what it is you are assigned a navigator. And that navigator would work through with you to make sure that you had the ability to take care of yourself, to be housed, to be able to eat, to take care of yourself so that you're not dropping out of school, to be able to take on 2nd or 3rd jobs. It's not necessarily financial assistance. Again, it's planning. It's planning and aggressive resource planning connection as well.
There may be some other resources that you know about, they may not know about.
Exactly.
I will say I'm a little bit disappointed because if UTEP and the minors, I know that UNT, they have counselors that is what they do for anybody who walks in. They help them write the resume. I donate suits to them, because there's college graduates who don't have a suit. Most of them have to be cut and tailored down a little bit, but because we put there's a lot of money in higher ed that goes into every single state university they're supposed to have departments that does that. We may not do a good job, or they may not do a good job communicating that to all the 20,000, 30,000 students that are on the campus at El Paso from there. But I would say there is definitely a resource, because I know the ones at UNT very, very well. I've actually gone in and mentored on, how to go do an interview, and done that. The resources are there. The challenge is sometimes people just don't know where do I ask, where do I go to get help, and that's that barrier breakdown
That's where
sometimes.
Your organization can help. One last question, the lady in green, and then I'm going to let our panelists have a last couple of thoughts.
Thank you. Hi, Mary Kate. I'm with Americans for Prosperity. First, wanted to
What did you say your name was?
Mary Kate.
Oh, I thought you said Mary Kay. I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah, I know
that's
you.
good.
I know where
Mary
you're
Kay.
going.
Unfortunately, there's no Ashley here today. Wanted to say thank you all so much for being here and taking the time. I think something interesting that was brought up earlier on this panel was that the current incentives are designed to hurt parents and families that are together. And I know it's incredibly important that we protect single parents when it's called for, but we also don't want the system to tear families apart. Right. And unfortunately, I think this is something that we're seeing across industries. We worked with a mom who had twins prematurely. She had to put them through the NICU, and a nurse actually told her, you should divorce your husband because then you can get on Medicaid. Yep. And yeah, unfortunately, I think in a lot of areas, the government is trying to tear families apart when it's not called for. So I was just curious if you guys had any solutions to help address that issue, maybe more specifically to what we're talking about today and helping lift people out of poverty.
The solutions, and some of these are at the federal level, which makes it harder right now, but the solutions is to the people that do have that need assistance, that assistance is stair-stepped in a way that they're always better off keeping or improving their own financial or job situation. Right now, it's not like that, and keeping the family together. That's what we're working on with the states of Louisiana and Georgia and this Alliance for Opportunity. And we're trying to figure out a way, as much as we can, knowing that the federal government right now is not going to approve it, to be able to do that and come up with ideas that on the money that's attributed to us, that we can provide those incentives to stay together. Because we are 100% with you. Ultimately, we will have to have some help at the federal level. Now, it is one of the things that Senator Springer and his fellow legislators did in 2021, which proved to be very important, not for this particular issue, but on the pro-life issue. They passed a trigger bill, and trigger bills say if something changes at the federal level, this bill will automatically go into effect. So one of the things Rod and I have been working on are trigger legislation that if there is a change in Washington, maybe in the president or the Congress up there, and they have the ability to make some of these changes, that we already have the legislation passed that will put things like I just talked about in place, as opposed to having to wait, and sometimes in our case, 18 months to be able to do that. Trigger legislation is something that can be very important. So thank you for your question. I appreciate that. Okay. We are finishing up here, but I just wanted to give everybody a chance to maybe say a final 30-second clip and tell them, if people want to help you and your organization in here, how can they do that?
Well, what anybody in a nonprofit is going to tell you is we can always use funds from unrestricted funds. We have been hit the same way everyone else has been hit, and it's harder this year. We have had to cut our staff by 5 people this year, which means we can serve less people. So that would be the big issue. I would tell you that the biggest thing, though, is your interest, and the fact that there's that many people in the room and some of the questions you've been asking. It's inspiring, and I appreciate it. Yeah.
Senator Springer, how can these
No,
help you?
look, as always, reach out to your senators, your representatives, share your ideas, share your passions. Mary, I agree with you. I've heard a story where, couple walks in, boyfriend, girlfriend, we're pregnant, and the state employee tells them, don't get married, you'll get more benefits and do that, and that's wrong. And we need to figure out how to break that down and pass that along. But one component we sort of miss sometimes in this, and it's really one of the toughest to figure out how you do it, and it's why I started down with the breakdown of the church, is, we all have social capital. And I would probably say anybody on this stage, and probably most people in this room, can't be homeless tomorrow. Why? Because we have so much social capital. I know that if I was in trouble, I could call my friend Ron, and even if I lost my house and they said, come couch surf, y'all, we'll give you a room to you and your wife to live in, get you back up on your feet. But when people become, disconnected from their communities, they're much more susceptible to being stuck in these death traps or these spirals that downward. And it's one of the reasons that so much of us Christians and people of faith just say, we have to continue to believe that there's a greater being, and we have to have our communities connected to those, because at the end of the day, they're immensely quicker to be able to grab a hold of somebody and say, I can tell you the 800 parishioners at Sacred Heart and Catholic Church, whether there's somebody that works maintenance at a plant, or they're a state senator, we all look out for each other because we have that social capital.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. Rod?
Yeah, first of all, I think this may be an all-Catholic panel. So,
No, it's not. In
but,
fact, it takes, how many Catholics does it take to have the same theology as one Baptist? 3. Monadoo, baby, I got up there.
Anyway, so there is.
Baptists to make sure that our beer doesn't disappear.
That's true. Yeah. That's
So
one thing.
on
If you
that,
ever take a Baptist fishing, you got to take 2 of them, because otherwise, drink all your beer.
We all certainly believe in not just the role of churches, but other private charitable organizations. But as long as we do have government services, and we have a lot of them at the federal level, the state level, and down to the local levels, we can always do a better job. And there are tools that we're looking at right now that would certainly help us consolidate and find some efficiencies, do a better job of helping the actual applicants that need those assistance, and make sure that those are in fact temporary. We avoid some of those cliffs that we were talking about for various reasons, and actually do a better job of finding efficiencies. And I think with all of those programs, we'll continue to let Texas not only lead in job creation, but help the individual Texans scattered across the state, no matter where they're located, find those opportunities and help themselves and empower themselves.
Well, thank you, panelists, very much. Thank you, Rod, especially for chipping in here. I appreciate that. I knew you would be prepared. And Senator Springer, thank you. It's always good to be with you. And Cindy, it's very inspiring what y'all are doing. And so we just ask that you never tire in doing good, and keep that up.
Well, you guys inspired me today.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
And thank y'all for being here.